Yeah, I already got people. They're already in there laughing. All right. Someone said lots of lags and interruptions. So we'll try this again. I'm not sure if this is going to go off well or not.
Hmm.
So this is Gerard coming back again, folks, with brother Carl Kaiser. Interesting gentleman. We get into a lot of good discussions on the thread around some topics that are considered to be a little fringe. And so this is the second time I'm going to try to launch it. If you guys are seeing any delays or lags or anything, please let me know. And then we'll get started. So one of the questions I had, Carl, is I noticed you stood out in discussions. As I think you know, I like to talk about everything. There
Hmm.
are topics I want to avoid. To me, knowing the truth about everything is everything
Hmm.
to the future. So anyway, if it's whether it's aliens, whether it's oh my goodness, if it's Bigfoot, I haven't found a Bigfoot person yet. If it's flat Earth, if it's politics, if it's Syria, if it's like I just want to know the truth. I think
Hmm.
in our world, when we know the truth, we can actually make good informed decisions.
Yeah.
And so that's what kind of led me down the path to talking about some of the things I do. And I bumped into you. And so one thing I noticed about you, Carl, is every time the UFO or alien topic comes up, I think you ancient archaeology also. I noticed that you jumped right in, and you seem very on the topic, which made you really stand out. And so I say, I got to talk to this guy. I got to get this guy on so we can have a conversation. And so, but before we get going, let me just check with the room, see how everybody is doing today. Hopefully, everybody's doing good. Can you guys hear us well? We had some challenges here on the East Coast, and so we had some snowstorms that came down. I've had to make some switches around in the studio. I want to make sure bandwidth wise we're doing okay. You guys can hear us. If you guys can hear us, give me a thumb. Okay, we got some thumbs up, so we're ready to go. So I'm here with brother Carl Kaiser, and I want to kind of explore this alien UFO topic because it's the weekend. Okay, Lynn said we're excellent, so we're good to go. Walt says he can hear us. Stan says we're all good. So, Carl, tell me what's going on. How did we go from living in a world where it was crazy to talk about aliens or life in outer space, and now it's okay to talk about like what's talk to me here.
Wow. Well, whenever I talk about something like this, I have to decide, well, do I try to actually convince people, or I just tell them what I think and then try to convince them after I tell them what I think. Um, so I'll just jump to the punchline. And this is something I found just in the last couple of years. There's whistleblowers coming out of the government like crazy, and they're talking about government space programs and contacts with ETs. So if you look at it that way, we've had this going on for decades, even like since the 50s. It's just been kept secret, like a lot of black programs are kept secret. And so if it's always been out there, then there have always been some people who saw things. There have been people who had direct contacts. There have been people, some of the whistleblowers had parents in the aerospace industry, and they said, they tell them around the dinner table. They go, guess what? You don't want to run into a reptilian. And I know that's hard to believe, but there's just a lot of people who are like whispering about this because they don't want to get shamed, they don't want to get mocked, or because they don't want to get fired from their job and McDonnell Douglas or wherever. So, but you get enough of that going on, circulating around for a few decades, and people become less like inhibited about talking about it. And like I said, now with these whistleblowers, it's like opening an encyclopedia. They're basically telling the whole history of the last 50, 60 years. So, so that's why I suppose maybe all that together is why more people are talking about it.
Yeah, I hear you with that. You know what did it for me? 'Cause
Mm.
and I was one of those kids whose father worked at the Pentagon, and so I got
Uh-huh.
into some interesting conversations with some of his friends, and I realized we weren't really being told the truth, but I don't think I knew how deep the rabbit hole was.
Yeah, yeah.
And so what did it for me was when Obama was elected and
Hmm.
filled out that form which asked the what you on whitehouse.gov if the government had any evidence of alien life. the way the White House responded, where they said that effectively we have no knowledge of any extraterrestrial life is interfacing with the planet. The minute the White House said that, over for me. It was no holds barred. At that point, I knew they were lying. Like before that, I was a skeptic. I wasn't sure what was going on, and these whistleblowers coming forth, and these these guys I used to talk to when I was a little kid, and the things they used to say about how the thing that stood out to me the most, it was he was a gentleman, worked at the Pentagon. He worked on these dark projects, and he basically told me that he asked me if I liked Star Trek, and I said, oh yeah. And he said, because the way the conversation started, we were talking. He was over for Thanksgiving. We were talking, and he was kind of a savant. He actually was in a wheelchair, but he was a very smart guy. And I was talking about the Desert Storm at the time. We were going into the Gulf War, and I knew everything, Carl. You couldn't tell me. I knew everything. I said, "Oh, we're gonna kick Saddam's butt. We're gonna get in the M1A, F-16s, F-15s. We're gonna nail him. Saddam. He's not gonna see." I was excited, and then he pulled me aside later after dinner, and he said, "Let me tell you a secret." He said that the war that's going to be fought is for television. He said, we have the technology to pretty much do whatever we want, on this planet. We do not need to send our military, our tanks, our airplane. We don't need to send any of that.
Yeah.
He says, do you ever watch Star Trek? I said, yeah, I love Star Trek. He said, so he said, everything in Star Trek, and I'm going to misquote it because I was 17, 18 at the time. But effectively, he said, everything that you saw in Star Trek, he said, we've already done.
Other whistleblowers are saying exactly that, man.
He said, we've either done it in a lab, in a micro scale, or we've done it on a macro scale, but we've already done it all. And all of that, the war that we were going into, it was because they didn't want to reveal to the world the type of technology that we actually have.
Sure.
He said that everything that Gene Roddenberry didn't come up with Star Trek. He said that Gene Roddenberry was given the evidence about Star Trek, and so it was a deep conversation. I didn't believe it, and I just tucked it away, and it was interesting, and I paid attention. But then when Obama came out and said that we have no evidence, and 14 governments from around the world have all released their UFO files, their UFO videos, and finally America got to a point where they begrudgingly released something. That's when anytime the government says it, I believe it. Like if they say Bigfoot doesn't exist, I'm believing Bigfoot.
Well, you know what's funny? You mentioned Gene Roddenberry because he started as like an assistant on The Outer Limits. Remember that sci-fi show from the 60s?
Yeah.
And I got this in the whistleblowers too. The guy who wrote the first Outer Limits and produced it, his father was in the secret space program. And he even named some weapon in the TV series that's the name of an actual device they have in the program. So it's interesting that there's so much pollination between these two. And it's funny too because skeptics will say, "Oh, that just sounds like Star Trek." They think that when they point to sci-fi that it like debunks you, but actually it's the other way around. Yeah. A lot of these secret programs in Southern California and Nevada, and then you got LA down there in Hollywood, and there were people that had associations and relations there, and that's how some of this information leaked its way into the sci-fi industry. So
but that leads me down a good route, right? So I saw a whole bunch of people come in the room, and Debbie actually had a good comment. Debbie and I, we've gotten a few discussions about this also, which is but there's the real evidence. But then there's also the psyops, right? It's the disinformation, and I kind of think with the disinformation part, like I think that because Mexico and Britain and Russia and all these countries came out with their UFO files, I think that America was forced to do it. Mm-hmm. Usually, I mean, the way my mind works, I would think that if you're the last one out the gate with the information, it probably means because you've done the most with it. You have to hide. Perhaps you went to the moon and found things you don't want to tell anybody about. And so they begrudgingly came out with it at the last minute. But between that and probably before that, there was a powerful initiative to get people to look like they're crazy when they talk about
it. Oh, sure.
And so they did it then, and I think they do it now. And I think what a lot of our friends are seeing is a lot of the disinformation that's put out there, because if you can effectively sabotage,
Oh, sure.
these whistleblowers with fake whistleblowers or people who are just obviously off the rails, then you can break down the truth of the fact that we live in a galaxy, in a universe that's probably teeming with life, the same way Earth is teeming with life, that biology does what it does everywhere. Like multicellular organisms, their whole purpose is to figure out a way how to survive in an environment better and collect resources. And so every environment we've gone to, whether it's super hot and super, the
Sure.
at the bottom of the ocean,
Right.
or the biological creatures we found on the glass of the space station, or
And then little tardigrade.
yeah, the tardigrades, yes, the tardigrades. And so but everywhere we think there can't be life, multicellular organisms
Sure.
have proven they can survive in these environments. And so so I get the disinformation and the truth side of it, but how do you talk to people? Like, how do you talk to people when you're just trying to get them to open their mind and not pay attention to what the disinformation is, how it's driving people?
Well, like we were talking about earlier, I find this interesting because that's kind of a general concern in a lot of topics. I mean, how do you talk to people about that the political system is rigged? How do you talk to them about that there's like a secret government behind the government? How do you talk to them about spirituality or psychic phenomena? And people are either open or not open to all these topics, and you get the same kind of blowback in different areas.
Yeah.
I guess the bottom line to me is you got to kind of gauge your audience. I mean, like you and I, if we were just talking among ourselves, we would just go full bore on this is what I think. This is what I think. If you're talking to somebody who's really skeptical and really negative, I found that you usually can't really persuade them. I mean, the way I put it to myself this week is some people that come into these conversations and they have an agenda, and the agenda is I ain't going to change my mind. and they might debate with you or where's your evidence, but if you put evidence in front of them, they'll just reject it. They'll just play whack-a-mole. Whatever you put in front of them, they'll reject that evidence. And so, when you like that, you're not going to change their mind. Although I have a strong science background, and when a lot of people who are skeptical sort of posture like skepticism is the rational thing, or believing that something doesn't exist is rational, and that's not rational. That's not how logic works. That's not how empiricism works. So if somebody wants to pull that on me and kind of pull the science angle and say it can't be because I know science and you don't, I can address it on that what we call like an epistemic level, or that they're using faulty reasoning to dismiss something. Because a lot of people that are really skeptic, they won't look at evidence. So if you don't look at evidence, if you don't want to, that's fine. Then just say, I don't know, I'm agnostic. I mean, that's the only legitimate disposition, is to say I'm agnostic. But when you start to sort of knock it, then without looking at the evidence, then there's really no basis for that. So those are the hardest people to talk to or try to persuade. And I don't usually try. There has to be a certain curiosity and openness, And if you got that and you're willing to look at evidence, then you'd be surprised at what you found. And it's interesting. My son was studying statistics a few years ago, and I never took it, but I helped him with this. So I read his textbook, and I realized this is how statistics works. They don't get one little piece of data and go, throw that out and no, I don't like that one. They get as much data as they can. They graph it all out, say, okay, there's a pattern there. What could that imply? And it's the same in any other field. You have to be open and really just sniff out as much evidence as you can find, and then see what that evidence in total points to, But to even do that, you have to be curious. You have to be imaginative. Maybe not intimidated to change your mind or change your worldview. So
you're saying if I'm a Democrat, I need to be imaginative and have an open mind that the Republicans actually aren't psychologically and it's funny you were saying that, because what I'm thinking.
Well,
I'm thinking about how people already made their minds up in conversations.
Sure.
And the same, I don't want to call it ignorance, because it's a really harsh word, but the same closed-mindedness
sure.
see in the political discussions.
Yeah.
the discussions I like to have about vaccines and synthetic drugs and
Yeah.
the left right paradigm. And if you've already made your mind up about vaccines work or they don't, if you already made your mind up about the Democrats are all, what do they call them, libtards or something?
Yeah, that's
All
one
these
of them.
names. If you've already made your mind up that white people are this or black people are this,
Yeah.
you already have your ism. And you're right. I don't really like to get engaged in too much discussion with those folks because I like to learn.
Hmm.
There's no way I'm going to learn if my mind's not open to what you might tell me. If I've already made my mind up, then I can't learn anything.
Sure.
And I think like that's how our conversation kind of started is that, we talked about our background. We were both IT guys, geeks, nerds. We had the pocket protectors and all of that stuff and worked in the industry, but we also were in band and we did all the geek stuff.
Yeah.
Really cool. That rapport was already there.
Sure.
Something in me is just, it says, okay, I like this guy. I respect this guy. I can relate to this guy. I want to know what he knows. And so I think it's important to get there. I think someone just posted in the room. They were talking about the Sirius, the Sirius documentary, and it was talking about how the last wars with the aliens. And when I think of that, I always think about Armageddon, right? The stories from the Bible, how the end times are coming. The Mayans had their end time prophecy. All these religions, I think the Muslims even have an end time. They all have these end time ideas of how the world ends. And that also walks me down the whole PSYOPs thing, right? Because wasn't there a whistleblower on with Stephen Greer and the Disclosure Project who said that the government was going to use a staged alien attack to, using craft that we've never seen before in the public to stage an alien craft to try, I guess, bring fear in the world to get everybody to get behind the government. Did you hear anything about that?
I've heard some leaks about that. I mean, and here I have to talk to like-minded people. I think the government pulls psyops on us all the time, and I don't think there's necessarily a limit to what they would do, especially if they feel that the people are wising up and the people are dissatisfied and they know the system is corrupt. I mean, the last thing they want to do is let us get ahead of them and say, all right, enough of this crap, and as we know, it's legal for them to do psyops on us. So what the heck,
Yeah.
And I have heard rumors about that. The other side, and again, I'm talking about what some leakers say. They say that positive ETs want to make contact with us, but the reason the government keeps a lot of it secret is because of the ETs. It's not because of the technology. I mean, why wouldn't they release certain technology or publicize it? I mean, there's a military aspect to it, but they publicize the stealth fighter and that sort of thing. And this started in the 50s with Eisenhower, that the reason they didn't want to release it was because of the ET connection to it, and they don't want us to know about ETs associations with humans or their availability. And one part of that is to sort of promote fear about ETs, that whatever ETs are out there, they're going to come and eat us up, they're going to conquer us. And so, of course, if we have that in fear and all we see are, nasty ETs in movies, then it would be easier to have a slap if they wanted to. And they have the technology because a lot of these UFOs are Air Force machines. So they have it. They could fly it over us if they wanted to. So, I mean, and again, I'm saying what a lot of whistleblowers are talking about now. I don't know what you think.
Well, I think we have to kind of, I think the biggest problem for a lot of people is that if you went your whole life, alien had my baby, you're crazy, you're not saying anything about that, you're nuts, and you're just now being exposed to it, it's really hard to process what's true and what's not true, or what seems plausible and what's not. Where I kind of direct people to listen to the testimonies,
right?
Because the credibility right now in all of these projects, all of this information coming out I think is listening to the people who actually worked with it.
Right.
People who you can prove their backgrounds, that they did work in the FBI, they worked in the CIA, they were a security guard at the Wright-Patterson. They were, so they were in capacities to know these things. They actually were an astronaut. They did go to space. Before going to space, they didn't believe in aliens. coming back. You keep them away from MUFON and all these alien events, you know. And so I kind of point people to, it's like with the vaccine debate. People like to debate these things.
Right.
I tell them, don't debate other people on vaccines. You're not a doctor. You know, you're not a researcher. You're not a scientist. You know, it's your word against someone else's. And we got to get out of these non-professional discussions because they're just static. They cause problems. It's about being right, and it's about ego. And just point to the whistleblowers, to the people who have the testimony, point to the Edward Snowdens. And so I kind of like to do that. And so I think we're heading into an interesting time, though. I think we're heading into an interesting time because I am seeing what you were talking about before, where you have people from all different disciplines who are all starting to link these things together, and a community's coming together, right? Some people are there and around because they know the government lies about everything. Others are there because they're anti-war, you know, and that ties in with the military budget. Others are there because they follow the whole alien UFO thing. Others are there because of the spiritual side of it,
right?
You know, and life came from other planets, the Pleiadians or whatever. Others are there because they're religious and they know that their religion didn't exactly get it all right. And so all these people are coming together under what I think people are calling like the truth movement, I guess if you could call it that. And so there's a whole bunch of different aspects. And so what I like to think about is how do you take all of these people from all these different backgrounds and give them the ability to respect each other enough to have open-minded conversations instead of shutting each other down and calling each other out, but having rapport and respect for each other and to talk to each other. So now I think you said that you kind of followed this from when you were very young. When did you first become interested in the idea that humans, that we're not alone in our own little beady heads, that there might be something else out there?
Well, before I answer that, I'll just say a couple things about what you said. I mentioned whistleblowers, and I agree. You know, we can talk about our theories and what we read and what we are, you know, impressed by that we read. But and I just mentioned this one website called Gaia, and Gaia has like thousands of videos on many different topics. You know, typically kind of like new agey topics, but also diet and yoga and meditation and so on. But and while there are free videos of these whistleblowers on the website, Gaia has a series they call Cosmic Disclosure. It has 140 videos. I mean, it's like 60 hours of whistleblowers. And I kind of got my stuff for free as long as I could. And finally, about a few months ago, I just signed up for it, and I watched all those videos. And I think that's useful. Yep. All of it.
Okay.
And, you know, and I'll give one name, Corey Goode, Coreygoode. He's the whistleblower who knows the most, but he's not the only one. But the reason I say this is because you're right. You know, when you look at somebody's face, they're saying, I did this. This is what I was in. And you let them talk for 30 hours. You know, to me, you get a pretty good idea if they're a bullshitter or if they're contradicting themselves. You know, if they talk that much and they never contradict themselves, and then here's someone else who kind of corroborates that in a different way, you know, and it brings it down to the human level, like as if you were talking person to person with this person, like you with your, I forget if you said it was your father who told you about Star Trek tech or whoever that was, you know.
One of his friends. No, Pop,
yeah.
He didn't say it. He was a satellite engineer. He gave me another conspiracy.
Oh, okay. So anyway, but I think I would encourage a lot of people to go track down these whistleblowers because, you know, you can watch them and decide if you think they're honest or not. I mean, some of them are crying about the trauma of what they saw. Some of them have been harassed. And that's the other thing. Like, you know, if they're just spouting nonsense, why are the police taking their property? Why are they being intimidated and threatened? You know, so they're getting the kind of threats that you're getting in the political sphere by people who are blowing the whistle on stuff. So, so that was one thing I would say. And you asked me about when I was young. I guess I can't explain it. I've always just been curious about everything. So now I'm going to throw this out there. This is out there. Some people say, and I do believe we're born over and over again, that some of us may have past life associations with ETs or whatever. So we just have this fixation, you know, like people, a lot of fixations that we have apparently are just part of our character, and our character goes from life to life. So that's kind of a root of it, but I can't say that in my own case. But I was curious about that. And in the 1970s, there was also a series called by this writer, Carlos Castaneda, who was an anthropologist, and he wrote these books about this shaman in Mexico named Don Juan. But, they would do peyote, and he would have all these psychic experiences and commune with animal spirits, and all that. And I was like, wow, man, that's cool,
Yeah.
So all I could say is I was always curious, and I never kind of pushed something away. Instead, I wanted to try to integrate, how does that fit with that? How does that fit with that? Does that intuitively feel right to me? Is that inspiring to me? And I guess all I can say is that's kind of served me well over the years, because I don't feel like I've been led down some dark alley where I'm just believing nonsense or whatever. So
that's a good way to go. So and that leans into the spiritual side, right? Yoga and meditation and the spiritual folks and the pineal gland and psychedelics and the CIA project. What was the CIA project where they gave all these people the psychedelics and they were studying them? MK.
I forget. Well, MK Ultra was. There's stuff about that in the whistleblowers too. Man, this is one reason why it's kept secret, because there's nasty shit that goes on in there that's illegal or just atrocious. So, and they don't know how to leak a little bit. They don't know how to tell us a little bit without all of it coming out. But yeah, they've done thorough research into how can we manipulate the mind and even weaponize people through their minds. And they also use that on their own employees. How can we keep our employees from blowing the whistle, from telling? How can we keep them loyal? So it's unfortunate, but a lot of what we're hearing is the way these programs are really compartmentalized, and the way they keep people under control is they use a lot of whatever mind control they can use, and intimidation, and so.
You know what I think on that? I'm gonna tell you, I have a thought. So there was a guy who wrote a book, and I forgot his name. He was studying the psychedelics, and I think it was the only legal study of psychedelics that was outside of, I guess, the CIA in America. But they sent a couple people under with DMT. Someone in the room was talking about DMT, and they sent a couple people under with DMT. I forgot his dimethyltryptamine.
What's the other one?
And the interesting part was not only did people see visions, but they saw the same vision. Not only did they see beings, they saw the same beings. And so he wrote a book, and I forgot his name. Somebody will post it in the room. But that drives me into this thought that, okay, so what if the pineal gland is some sort of way that we're being communicated to? What if, Edgar Casey, when he went to sleep, there were communications and downloads. We're IT guys. Right?
Sure.
Right. The Windows update that we're getting when we go to sleep. Because
downloads is the term they use. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's released when we go to sleep. What if when you take certain compounds, whether it's DMT or the mushrooms or the other ones, what if it is some sort of release? What if the burning bush, the theory was the burning bush, actually, Moses, it was an acacia plant. The acacia plant is DMT. It's released when it's burned. What if he was seeing visions and it tapped him into this download, this upgrade, Windows upgrade of his software? What if we are just software, like Nikola Tesla, like the kid in Russia, I forgot his name, Star Kid or whatever they called him, Einstein. What if we are being driven as a species by this God-like thing? We call it God, call it, Buddha, call it, whatever you want to call it. I mean, they all were saying they were here to help humanity. We are just an experiment in a lab called Earth. They're monkeys. Debbie has me laughing all the time. She talks about monkey. So what if we are this 98% monkey thing? And the aliens don't want us to die, and so they send down people like Nikola Tesla, or they do something with their pineal gland to teach them how to use high electronics or whatever. Like we are just a species being driven to some sort of an end.
Well, I'll just mention something about Tesla. He was obviously a mechanical, scientific genius, but he was a natural genius, and he would write things that were just straight out mysticism. And basically, when you look at what he knew, it wasn't something he could have learned, and maybe he couldn't even have derived it, theoretically from the physics we had. It was just obvious to him. That's mysticism when something like that is just apparent to you, And he often made statements that basically said, yeah, this is all I just see it. The reason I'm able to invent this stuff is because I see the energy in reality, and I just make the machine that relates to that. So So he was a mystic in the classical sense, even though we think of him as like a scientist, but he invented alternate current. I mean, he's like, we owe a lot of our current like landscape of technology just to him individually. Now, when you asked about experiment, there's different points of view on that. I mean, I tend to, my broadest worldview is kind of spiritual, and I think we're all here to grow, and we come back and back until we get it right. But in the context of that, there's other species here, including ETs, and they're growing. And but at the same time, it's interesting because you alluded to this. I think people are waking up in all these areas at the same time. And you can see them separately, or you can see it as all of humanity is kind of waking up, to truth, reality, in all of its aspects, spiritual, political, galactic, technical, and almost all of it has been kept from us. And so a lot of it gets back to why don't we know this, or why haven't we been told this? Because a lot of this is known, the technologies are known, like for healing. And so there's a political angle to all of it, which is unfortunate. But, eventually we got to kind of take control of our own destiny politically too, as well as spiritually and technically and so on.
Are we in a computer simulation?
Well, I don't intuitively think that we are. But it's a kind of loaded question. I mean, well, I would say that because if you leave out the computer part, I mean, people are realized in spiritual traditions like, advanced yogis and meditators. They pretty much say reality is not what it looks like. It's kind of an apparition. It's not that it's not real. Some people misinterpret Buddhism and say there's nothing real, nothing exists. But it's that it's in its ultimate nature, it's not the way it looks to our senses. And apparently through your higher senses, like the pineal gland and these subtle senses, you can see through this facade of the reality that we're in. So in that sense, the reality is kind of a play of, energies and so on. But I wouldn't, well, you could say it's a simulation, but I don't know if it's driven by anybody. Some people would say it's driven by us, like on an unconscious level. The way we interact with the world shapes the world, that there's really no subjective objective separation, and that the way we perceive the world and interact with it creates that world. So for example, if we're always angry and enraged, then we always have wars, and we even have like turmoil of different kinds, but that's just kind of an external manifestation of our anger and our aggression, coming out in the environment. So I don't know if that answers your question. I would leave the computer out, but the simulation, you could say, yeah, reality isn't exactly the way it appears to us. And why should it be? We only have these senses. Different creatures have different senses. Different creatures live in different dimensions or domains, or, so, we only see a tiny, tiny wave region of the wavelength of light,
we only
so
see what's in front of us.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think that is really one of the key points, is that we see what biologically we're predisposed to see anyway.
Right.
We don't even know what's real. Blue actually isn't blue.
Sure.
All matter is energy, and like we are creatures that are captive in
Sure.
these human cattle things, right? And
Sure.
there could be other dimensions out there. There could be creatures among us that can see those other dimensions.
Yeah.
So many things to me, I think it's all the same thing.
Sure. There could be other dimensions in here.
Yes.
That's the other side of it.
Yeah, I mean,
Out
exactly.
there and here.
I mean, the drivers behind life in DNA, right? I love to talk about epigenetics and how we don't even know, how DNA is flipped, right? The genes get flipped based on this unknown thing they call epigenetics. It's
Right.
not any matter or energy or anything we can measure, but that's what flips our DNA. And I think that gets back to what a lot of the ancients talked about and what they did, the miraculous things they saw. If someone did walk on water, if aliens came out of the sky, if, some creatures were here in the past, or people who had the ability to do things like Tesla or Casey, or, some of the people who are doing the CIA used to study what's the thing where you bend the spoon? What is that called?
Oh, telekinesis maybe, or something.
And so, what if, all of that is possible, but it's coming from a different dimension. It's coming from an omnipotent alien, something that's all knowing, I love the religious hooks, because to me, when I look back, I think, the ancients were all saying the same thing. They were saying it different ways, they called it different things, but the reality we see is not true. Much more out there. And I think that's what takes me back down to the whole black budget project thing, is that and why the government lies about this stuff and they put out lies here or there to confuse people is because you can control the world if you understand how a lot of this, you can control the world if you understand a very small percentage of it, and you're on a planet where most people aren't even interested in knowing about it.
Yeah, I agree. And, we talk about reality. I mean, the government does its best to program our own reality, what they want us to believe by giving us a picture or making us think of a narrative. And at the same time, with the government and the media, they're not making us think of certain other narratives. So they either tell us one thing and they keep us away from questioning this and questioning that. And what only we can tell is when we question something that gets a little too close, then they start censoring, striking us down. But we talked about, what's reality compared to what our physical senses show. But then when you get to what's reality compared to what people are programmed to believe and expect and imagine, people can really be, I'm just going to use an extreme example. Use North Korea. The government completely controls people's lives, and they're able to make people live in a kind of fantasy globe where they have no conception of what the rest of the earth is like, but they're sure that they know what it's like,
Wait, are we talking about North Korea or America? I'm confused.
It's just difference of degree.
Like one of my major goals in life, Carl, is to delete my indoctrination. That's one of my major goals. Like, the thing that I really understand is a lot of things that I was raised to believe simply aren't true. And it's not a thing that my parents necessarily handed me intentfully, or the schools, but it's how we live. We're indoctrinated to believe certain things. We're indoctrinated, some people, to believe in aliens, others to believe it's crazy to believe in them, others that your doctor is always right, or your teachers are, your government's here to help. And so anytime something kind of comes up in my head that it's obvious that I was indoctrinated to believe this, not that this is true, I try to delete it. I completely try to. Let me ask you this question. Who's your favorite UFO, black budget project, free energy, whatever? Who's your favorite whistleblower? Do you have one?
Well, like I said, the person with the most content is Corey Goode. And you can check him out on YouTube with some free videos, and then he's got a lot of these videos on Gaia. He's the main person, and they use him to sort of corroborate others too. So he's out of the 140 videos, he's probably in 80 or 90 of them. But let me say something about that indoctrination. How can I say? I came upon some outlook recently because we talked about how people don't want to consider a different reality, especially if it shows them that authority is betraying them. That's a big thing where people don't want to be betrayed by authority. You can see an Oedipal aspect to that where, it's like, authority is like your dad, and your dad is all powerful, and you don't want your dad to threaten you, so you don't even want to think about it if your dad might do that. So they have this, and that's how I kind of read this aversion to admitting that, or even considering that, say, the government is lying to people. But at the same time, I came up with the idea that, denial is consent. On a certain level, if you don't want to accept it, you're agreeing. You're letting them do that to you by not wanting to face it, And so in a certain sense, we've been indoctrinated, but at a certain psychic level, we've let ourselves be indoctrinated. We haven't insisted on verifying things for ourselves or exploring them for ourselves. So there's a quality of the way we've been held down that is our own consent. And the flip side of that is we have to determine that we want to know the truth, and we want to find it out, whatever it is, and we want to take control of that, from whoever's trying to keep it from us. And I think when enough people do that, that will kind of launch this new era where that if we just demand, or turn this off and use now as disclosure, if we just demand to know these things, and we're not afraid to know them, and we're not afraid to talk about them, and we're open-minded, then they'll come, in any area, spirituality, technology, politics, ETs, and so on. And I kind of personally think that, and gets into the sort of spiritual side, I think we are in a momentous era that's kind of a rebirthing era. And a lot of what looks crazy now and traumatic, it's kind of like birthing pains. If you didn't know what birth was, you say, why is that lady like shaking and water's coming out of her? And what's happening? You know, it looks like a disaster, but it's a birth of something new. And I think we're in that kind of era over these recent generations. And I think it's going to turn out well. And I think we have to intend and demand that it turns out as well as it could. So, I mean, it's scary, but it's kind of like growing up in a way. I mean, humankind is to grow up and not let themselves be run by authority and false authority. And, you know, if you let other authority run you too much, eventually they're ripping you off, you know. So, I mean, we don't have representative government in a way, which is pretty clear, actually, but we've kind of let it be that way, you know. And I don't go too far this way, but, you know, a lot of my beef with Democrats, and I think Debbie has the same outlook, is, you know, we got a Trump because too many Democrats were making excuses for a corrupt party on their side. And they just let the party get more and more corrupt. Just like as much as you'll take, they'll keep cramming it on you. You know, well, what's the end game of that? It's not good. So at some point, people have to say no. And that's scary because what's the alternative? And you see the fear, I think, on a lot of people who don't want to, you know, get out of the duopoly. You know, they think there's no other choice. I just got to keep picking the lesser evil, even though I came with this idea that, you know, a duopoly of evil and lesser evil, it's a monopoly of evil. Mm-hmm. So you want to vote for that, you know? So, but it's scary. But it's like growing up. It's like taking the training wheels off and saying, "All right, humankind, all of us, we're gonna set our own destiny," you know. And if we have a government over us, we're gonna make sure the government represents us and does that, and we're not gonna take anything less, you know. And I think we have to do that.
But you know, one of the reasons I say it's scary, brother, because that was a good analogy, a birth analogy. I remember the birth of my first son. Oh, Carl, I went in there. I had my blind. I didn't want to see it. This way, I didn't want to see it, Carl. I knew it was gonna scare me, Carl. I'm from man. I'm a man. I didn't want to see it. And I stopped and
my son came out. He looked like a little blue alien when he came out.
Oh, blue, purple, green. He had all colors of the spectrum. His head, Carl, was shaped. He was like a cone head. He was like the people that are out of Peru, you know. And so, but it was good that I looked. It scared the hell out of me. It changed my life.
Yeah.
You know, it was wonderful to let that go, to see the truth. Oh my God. I'm not going to get too much into the details, but to see the truth. But then the truth in the long run was beautiful. Mm-hmm. You know, it was a beautiful thing. And so you're right. We have to be willing to look. To be willing to look at the truth. And it's going to shatter a lot of our belief systems, which is good though. I mean, you know, as a society, we're in big trouble if we don't get to the truth. So do me a favor. So Corey Goode, I just pulled up his picture. I think that's him right there. And it kind of briefly talked about who he is. Is he someone you would recommend somebody who's kind of curious as to what this is all about? Is he someone they should start with?
Well, two things. As a whistleblower, yeah. I mean, I've never seen anybody who has as much background as he does. And this is kind of odd. You say, well, why him? What makes him so special? One of the technologies they have is they can wipe out your short-term memory. So, and they do that regularly. In fact, one whistleblower talked about people work at Area 51. It's in the middle of Nevada. They go to work by going to the Las Vegas airport and they fly to Area 51. Well, some guys start working there and they realize at night that they can never remember what they did during the day at work because they have the ability to wipe your short-term memory. And so a lot of these whistleblowers don't have a full set of memories, but sometimes it comes back to people. Talk about download. It kind of comes from your higher self back into your brain. Even though they can kind of wipe your memory brain, they can't stop your deeper sort of psyche from remembering it. So, and then I know it's kind of an odd, you know, outrageous explanation that I'm offering here, but Corey Goode kind of has total recall of his experience. But he's got a lot of other people that corroborate him. But in terms of the sheer volume and what he's been through, you can get a lot of information from him. Now there's some free talks by him, and he has a website that has like just written transcripts. But maybe looking at some of his videos, there's one called Mount Shasta Secret Space Program Conference, and this is the term SSP. That's the term you should get to know. It stands for Secret Space Program, and it's the designation that they all use for these programs in the military. And I'll mention something else that's interesting. It just hit me last night. NASA is a civilian agency. And we used to think like, well, that's nice. We're not going to militarize space. We've made space exploration a civilian project. And now I realize, you know why? Because they do have a militarized space program. So they made a civilian one that's like the facade. We'll send a little box up and float around the Earth and put some people in and watch them float around. And we'll go to the moon. We'll pick some rocks, Meanwhile, the real advanced program is in the military. And that just hit me last night. It's like, aha, now I think I know why NASA is civilian. It's not because they don't want to militarize space. It's because they want to do it secretly, So anyway, that's a whole other consideration.
Quietly. They want to go get all of the was it helium-3 off the moon, and what was that element? Oh my goodness! One of the things that excited me was talk about Area 51 it was Bob Lazar who came back from Area 51, and he gave his testimony as to what he saw in he worked on some of the engines from the UFOs, and they tried to discredit him, but they proved that he did work at Area 51. I think he was one of the first ones who said that they get on the airplane at the Las Vegas airport and they have to fly in every day. But he was one of his interesting statements. He talked about the element that they worked with that made their engines work, right? I don't know if you've heard of this one. And I forgot the name of the element.
I think I know what you're getting at.
But they disproved. They said no, he's a lie. He's making it up. Blah 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 blah. And I found it interesting that it was about 5 years ago or so. That element that supposedly didn't exist is now on our periodic table.
Right. Well, the prevailing theory and even science. We talk about what's being withheld from us, even advanced science, because this technology relies on a more advanced science than we have, for example, faster than light travel. And so our science is also being kind of scaled back. But, atomic structure in the periodic table, the general idea was when the nucleus gets too big with too many protons, because protons are positively charged and they repel each other. So the idea was when it gets too big, it just can't hold together. And they do have, they call unstable elements, and this is radioactive decay and so on. But it turns out that's just a little hump. And at higher levels, I forget the number of the elements, there are higher elements that are actually stable. And I forget what they are, but they're so that there's a whole other range there that's off of the current table, but we've made those elements, and some of those are used in this propulsion technology. So it's very interesting if you're into physics and chemistry.
Unobtainium, that's what it's called. I keep messing that one up with unobtainium. Unobtainium and unobtainium, they're very closely related.
Well, you know what? They were using mercury at first, but when they used mercury, it created very high ionization it created X-rays. And so the early UFOs we had, it would kill you if they didn't clad it in this coating where the X-rays wouldn't get you. But then they stopped using mercury and they use these higher elements, which they don't produce harmful radiation. That's also why a lot of photos of UFOs look like fuzzy, because it actually it ionizes the air, and so the air is kind of like in an excited state, and so you actually visually can't get a refined, focused view of it because of what it does to the space around itself to hover. So, I mean, that's a technical aspect, but
so there's so many fun paths to go. You could sit here and talk about this stuff all day, but do you have a favorite UFO story? Do you have a favorite UFO sighting? Is there any one that stood out to you that's highly credible that you would focus on if someone were naysaying?
Well, if you speak of UFOs in general terms, let me say two things. I'm starting to think more in terms of ETs than UFOs, and ETs rather than aliens, because what we're finding is humanoid DNA is all over this part of the galaxy. If you think about dogs, how diverse dogs are, humanoid types are all over. And a lot of people are our cousins, and some of them look so much like us that they walk down the street and you wouldn't know. So I don't want us to think in terms of alien, because that's kind of a frightful term, there's a movie called Alien. And then also because I think what's coming is connection with extraterrestrials. And so that's more kind of where I want to put my focus than the UFO technology or the phenomena. But I know that's kind of the catchword that everybody thinks of in terms of that. Now, if you ask me what inspires me the most, I've heard so many now, it's hard to say. Some of the whistleblowers that are coming out now, if you imagine this, the government gets this technology in the 40s and 50s. It's the Cold War. They want to try to weaponize it. They want to stay ahead of Russia. You know, what are they going to do? They're going to get the smartest people they can find to reverse engineer this stuff. Because it's like putting a cell phone in front of an Indian, American Indian. I mean, how's he going to reverse engineer it? You know, this technology is so far ahead of us, we don't even have the science to understand it. So they got all the best engineers to reverse engineer this stuff and figure out how it works so that they could, you know, build it out themselves. And you hear about the greatest generation, you know, we talk about the Second World War veterans who are passing away now. We're kind of honoring them. Well, this is the other side of that generation. There were engineers who spent their whole life doing this, and they wanted the public to know because they were so proud of what they did. And they were always told 10 more years, we'll tell them 10 more years, and they never did it. And these guys are at the end of their lives too, and a lot of them are testifying. And because I'm a geeky guy, you know, it's interesting to me to hear these whiz kids, these teenagers who built their own rockets, you know, and then the military finds out, like, well, how'd you do that? All right, come on, you're working for us now, you know. Yeah. And I find that's interesting, maybe because I maybe put myself in that position of, you know, advanced technology and research and building stuff. But that's not a direct ET story, although they've all had connections with ETs because some ETs will help us reverse engineer, so they're in the lab with humans. But otherwise, I don't know. In terms of a single story, I'll say this, and I mean, this sounds odd. A lot of psychics and channelers now are picking up ET stuff, which they weren't before. And some of them will say, "I was there in an ET. I don't know why I'm like getting this, or I'm reading this person and I'm getting like you are reincarnated ET." But the spiritual side is starting to leak out ET stuff. And I find that really interesting, and it's just a totally different, you know, out of left field corroboration of what you're finding from other areas. But I don't know, if I was trying to think of one story, it's hard to say.
Well, I'll let you think about it. So you said a few things there that keep me in, that is technology. Mm-hmm. So what a lot of the big push now is about free energy, right? Like a lot of the push now is about what does the government have holding on to for a war, or to fight Russia or China, whatever they're up to with it, that they're holding back from humanity. And I think there's a lot of people who are getting interested on the idea, and I think it was Greer who started that if you have this high technology, you should be using this for the world. And I think Lazar did it also, which was, you know, this idea that we have a government that's allowed to have all these secrets and not utilize them for Earth. It's a crime against humanity. But then the other thing you said that I loved was that there's the other aspect that they get the Bob Lazars, they get the few scientists they have who might have been B students, some of them might have been C and D students, but they get 20 people to try to research and reverse engineer or work on a high piece of technology because they want to figure out how to weaponize it, as opposed to a Earth or a planet with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Carls or Gerards or Lazars, you know, who actually could figure out how to push that technology forward or utilize it. So even if you don't believe in the whole, you know, we recovered, you know, UFO thing, the whole point is they have secret technology that could be utilized for humanity, right? Sitting on it. And not only that, but how far have we been held back? How far has technology
really far
been held back because you have 20 people working on something where you could open source it and have 30,000 or 1 million software engineers or scientists actually working on something?
You know, that's a good point. And I'll say this, because a lot of people are like turned off by the idea of ETs, the people who are pushing for disclosure, their focus is on technology now. And the government has like somewhere around 5,000 to 6,000 secret patents. And a lot of it is in this area. And the short answer to why we don't have free energy is not because of military applications, it's because then we can send part of our income to the utility companies, which works its way up, through to the 1%. That's the short answer. Same way why we don't have the cure to cancer. So, so a lot of these things, and this is where it ties back to politics, that a lot of what's being withheld from us is to keep us dependent on this system that sort of milks us for our labor and pulls our money out for things like utilities when we could use free energy. The way faster than light travel works is it takes the energy in space. It doesn't need like a gas tank, it takes the energy in space and it adapts it through a kind of conversion system and it goes. Now the whole issue of like, why can't we go faster than light, that I won't get into that, but basically when people hear free energy, I think some people are like skeptical about it because you have the idea of perpetual motion and nothing's free and there's no free lunch, but space is energy. So the bottom line is can we make some technology that'll extract that energy from space? And the answer is yes, and people have done this. There are even videos of people have done this, and of course, when you do that, eventually you get a knock on your door, and guys in riot gear come and take your experiment, and they tell you don't do that again. So, and this has happened more than once. And there's even papers now. There's there's declassified papers that describe how this technology works. But yeah, I mean, that's the big push now because this technology can basically make energy free. They have healing technology, energy-based healing technology. So we don't have to pay for pharma, to pump us full of drugs for the rest of our life. They have, talk about downloads, they have technology to basically program into your head information. It's interesting how you see how the public face of technology is always advancing little by little. Yeah. And I noticed they're trickling it out to us, so we just buy the next one. We buy the iPhone 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. But they've got technology way in advance of that. But why give it to us when they could just dribble it out and make us, pick it up in scraps? And so...
and obsolescence.
Exactly.
They have... no, go ahead.
Anyway, so the real push now is for full disclosure, but also the technology, because it can basically do away with hunger. It can do away with energy crises and then all the related things like pollution and the wars over energy. And it will upset a lot of the deep state because they make their money and they're off of these industries and these war programs and everything else. So,
what got me on that on the fact front is Nikola Tesla and free energy, right? So if you actually go out to the FBI website, they finally released a lot of Nikola Tesla's documentation. And the sick thing about it, though, is a lot of it was redacted.
Yeah.
So you can download it. I downloaded it, and it kind of pushes us in this direction of they are lying. They do have high technology that's based on some of the premises that he had. Mm-hmm. Maybe through his pineal gland, maybe he got from aliens, I don't know, another dimension, a god, whatever it is, but they sit on this high technology because we allow our government to have secrets and we don't open source it. And so one of the things that really blew me away, if you go out and you download Nikola Tesla's documents, you'll see redaction after redaction after redaction after redaction, and it's the craziest thing. But when you have all of these corroborating whistleblowers, people who say they created free energy, they disappear, their patents get taken. Nikola Tesla said it. It really is. We are in a place where we're being kept in this, like you're talking about North Korea. We're being kept on a planet. We're being indoctrinated to believe we need to drive gasoline cars. The latest iPhone is the best.
Maybe a little solar, a little bit of, wave energy, a little wind.
Did you hear about oh my goodness, there was an act, and I want to say it was, oh goodness, a long time ago. There was a federal act that said that if you create any type of energy that's something like 20 or 30% more efficient than where the current standard is, that patent was grabbed because it would cause a destabilization in the energy market, which could cause a collapse. But there was an actual act that the federal government passed
We know where it would cause a destabilization.
It would cause a destabilization in a bank account of an oligarch or some oil.
Right, exactly.
But it's that, so you can't make a solar panel that's 20 or 30% more efficient. You can't do a wind generator or anything. And so they're slowly, so it's not just iPhone and it's not just, micro technology, but it's also energy where they're slowly.
Oh, sure.
We're destroying the planet because we allow them to slowly release things to us. For me, I like to say that I think politicians all need to have body cameras. Like, I don't think it helps for police to have body cameras. I think all politicians who write the laws, who have all the secrets, I think they should wear them, because if governments don't have secrets, then this information is open sourced.
Yeah, well, think about it. I mean, why should scientific information be redacted? It's not like national security. It's just basic science. But, yeah, I mean, a lot of people have stories about if you happen to be a whiz kid and you invent something, like one kid, and this is on Gaia, he was like a teenager, and he invented an antenna that could, like, receive signals over mountain ranges. I mean, he basically invented an antenna that the military had that nobody in the world had. What happens is you get a visit, and they'll offer you a lot of money, and if you don't take their money for your antenna, which then goes into the dark programs, then they might kill you, or they'll basically steal it as a patent, and then they'll prosecute you for this thing that they have patented. So whenever any kind of like real inventive thing, like Tesla, but Tesla's kind of happened over and over again here, where somebody invents something and they basically kind of scout around, and when they get wind of it, if they think it's got a lot of potential, they take it into the secret programs from that person. And then, maybe 50 years later, they drill it back out to us and they sell it to us for $500 or something, So it's all tied into like this corporate complex. And I'll mention that too, when the government started to build its craft, it used the aerospace industry. In fact, that was the beginning of aerospace. It went from, airplane to aerospace. Well, eventually the aerospace industry realized, well, you know what? There's no laws in space. And we're building this stuff. Why don't we go out into space? So there's a whole other space program by the aerospace industries. They have like a consortium because nobody's stopping them, and they have the technology. So, and that ties in with the aerospace industry itself. So anyway.
And so another fascination that I have, I think we kind of share this one too. I think Brother Dave just mentioned in the room, he's talking about Vimanas. And so you watched an awful lot of this, and so it was an ancient technology that the ancients, I think it was the Indian Sanskrit text, the Mahabharata, that talked about it. Plato came back with the Atlantean civilization. They had flying crafts. There's the ancient megalith cultures that we know have been in contact all over the planet on every continent. We don't know how, and so. Was there anything on Gaia in terms of what you watched that kind of talked? It's not just maybe UFO technology, but maybe it's ancient technology?
Well, and I'll cast this in a bigger sense. It appears that ETs came here in ancient times and even fairly recently, and then they decided to stop and let us be on our own for like the last 1,000 years or so. And so it's easy for us to say, oh, those ancient people, they're so superstitious. They have these mythical beliefs, strange creatures, but that's where they got a lot of this technology. And this is what the leakers found. And this gets into some stuff that's kind of hard to believe, but I'll just spill it out there. And it's funny because there are movies like this. The Nazis, the Germans, went to the Himalayan plateau, and they went to India and they investigated these documents, and they took whatever they could get, and they even kidnapped some people because they couldn't read Tibetan or Sanskrit, and they built this stuff, and it does hover. So they built it, and the reason it's round, the reason like saucers are round and bell-shaped, is because they have a spinning centrifuge inside. So they got to have something massive that spins, so you're going to make a craft that's round. And that's where the Vimanas were. And there's even a picture of in Germany they call it the Bellcraft. And there's a picture of one. It's so funny because people say, where's your evidence? There's actually a picture of Nazis standing around this craft. It looks like a big UFO. I mean, oh, that's not real. But what happened is
Glocke.
Glocke means bell in German.
Was it the Glocke? Yeah.
Yeah, it means bell. So that's where they got it. They basically got blueprints from ancient India. I mean, it's hard to believe, but they built it and it worked. So, but they also had connections with ETs who gave them a little nudge here and there and gave them some information to get things right. So, but that was the technology that we got, because here's what's interesting, and this relates to that emblem that you got. In the Second World War, we had spies, German Americans, who were fluent in German all over in Germany, and they infiltrated this program, and they were sending information back about these, UFOs to the National Reconnaissance Office. That's the intelligence wing of the Navy. So the Navy got it first. And the Navy built out their own space program, starting with that technology. But what's amusing is I sent you that logo, or that emblem. The National Reconnaissance Office has an emblem, and it's really interesting. Are you going to put it on, or I can just describe it if you...
Yeah, I just blew it up right there so everyone can see it.
Okay. What does it say? Like, there's no places out of our reach or whatever? It's so funny because the Navy's supposed to sail the seas and that's it. So why would they say there's no place out of our reach? They're not going to sail on land. They're not going to sail to the moon. So, and then you got this octopus with two arms reaching up into space. And to me, that's the clue. It's like, we're top dog, man. We can't tell you, but we're proud of it, and we're going to throw this little thing out there. But it was the NRO. The NRO was the office that got through the German program, and the man in the NRO who was right there getting these documents in and disseminating them, he's one of the whistleblowers on Gaia. His name is William Tompkins, and he was there from the earliest years that this program started to build out. Okay. So that's a lot. I know I just dumped a lot on you there.
No. I'm putting my headset in. I think someone said that you had a little bit of an echo. So I'll make sure that let you if this fixes it, guys, let me know. Hopefully that's a little better. So yeah, and so this gets us down into the delicious topic of Indiana Jones and what the Nazis were up to and how they were off, while they were fighting a world war, putting significant investment into sending Nazis to Antarctica, all throughout the world, to ancient sites. I mean, they were sending tanks and airplanes and people equipped to go and try to discover from these sites what the ancients talked about.
Well, they started that in the 20s and 30s, actually. Before the war, they started doing that. And there were two secret societies in Germany. One was called the Vril Society, okay, and one's, I think, the Tool Society. And this gets into weird shit because the Vril Society was not militarized. The Vril Society was just this group, mostly of women, and man, they were good looking. But anyway, I mean, look up Vril Society. They had long hair, and they say that they got kind of psychic instructions on how to make UFOs, and they apparently built them. And this was in the 30s, and the military didn't even care about it at the time. But when they came around to the wartime, they tried to adapt it for warfare. But the way that these crafts hover is kind of a dynamic equilibrium, and you can't fire a cannon off of it; it'll go, it'll go back the other way. So they were never able to weaponize them, or else we probably would have seen them in war, and that's why it didn't make its way into battle at the time. So, okay. But there were these secret societies that were building this stuff, and you have to ask, well, how do they know and how they get information? And they say they got it sort of psychically, but this is something I can't prove to anybody, but this is accounted by many different sources. And then if you look at different whistleblowers, and they will have seen information about it, because people inside the government programs, they sometimes have access to the history of this stuff, because this history is written, but it's not written for our, we don't have a need to know, so we don't know. Right. But Corey Goode is a person who was able to read through the government's history of how these programs developed, and so he kind of relays his information from that direction. But
right, and I got pictures flipping on the Foo Fighters. So, going back down that route, one of my favorite sightings had to do with World War II and how all the pilots and the gunners were coming back, and the navigators talking about seeing all these flying craft, the Foo Fighters, and they called them the Foo Fighters.
Right, I remember that.
So from World War II, and they have lots and lots of pictures of these craft that were fighting. And once again, it makes sense to me. It makes sense to me from that spiritual perspective that something is driving life on this planet. If this is an experiment, if this is if we're ants in a little ant farm, that it's driving us. The ancient cultures talked about them helping us. I mean, you go back to the Bible, who was it from the Bible who went up in the aircraft, or God took him into space? Enoch. And so, you know,
Oh man,
we have these
so much
stories.
about Enoch.
And then you get into questions about the Sumerians. How did the Sumerians know all of the planets that were in orbit? You know, and so I think it makes perfectly good sense.
Well,
that,
Well, and there's so much to get into, and the more I say, the more people go, "Yeah, right," you know. But the
I'm
whistleblowers
driving
say,
you. That's my
okay,
goal. I'm
well,
driving you.
well, then wherever I go is your fault.
Go. Listen, this is what
Um,
I do on the weekends. This is what I
sure,
do. Like I have
sure,
no interest in politics on the weekends. They try to
yeah.
take me down that rabbit hole, but on the weekends, I like to have a little. We got to talk about everything. You got to put it out there, and the only way I think people will be exposed to it is they have to hear from someone like you. They have to hear from someone who's a professional, someone who's got a career based in analysis and, you know, root cause, and, you know, a person who isn't, I don't want to put any stereotypes out there, but a professional, right?
Mm,
And so go there, brother.
mm.
If it's credible to you, go ahead and say it.
Well, now I'm relating what I'm getting from these whistleblowers from the government and from some psychics. I'm going to mention one psychic. That's such a kind of trivializing term. There's a woman online. She's probably 25 or 30. Her name's Gigi Young. And man, she's got all kinds of stuff. And she was just a psychic, and she started getting hits on ETs. And now she's got video after video about this. And I just mentioned that because it lines up with this totally other area of, you know, national intelligence and espionage in the Second World War. What they say is the Earth has been a genetic laboratory used by ETs to try to make different species, and I shouldn't say try, they have. And what's interesting is there's more diversity on Earth. You and me, you know, we don't look very similar. You know, there's more diversity among Earth people than there are among different ET species because we are basically different genetic experiments that were developed here. But also that's why, like I said, most ETs are humanoid because we literally share genes with them, and they're like our cousins. And I think, I mean, this sounds maybe pie in the sky, but I think for our own future, we should start to think in terms of them as cousins, because we're just an ET to them and they're an ET to us. Instead of being spooked by movies of scary aliens, they're going to hunt us down, eat our glands and everything, you know. And because I think that the disclosure is coming one way or another, and so I got off on that. But yeah, but they say that the Earth has been experimental. In fact, there are ETs that look like African Americans. There are ETs that look like Nordics. They call them Nordics. There are ETs that look somewhat like Mesoamerican Indians, like, you know, Mayans,
Yep.
And even Asians. So, and that makes you wonder, like, well, did Earth evolve this way, like from Africa, or did Earth evolve this way from off of the Earth onto the Earth? And we're just learning ourselves to manipulate genetics now. What are we doing? We're doing what we can. And the leakers are saying we're doing everything we can in these dark programs, even though we're not talking about it. So
Right.
if you projected us ahead of 500 years, would we be genetically engineering ourselves? Maybe even in 50 years? So,
Oh,
I mean, if we could, we would. So, and there are species who could, and they did, and we're what they did. That's
or we are. There's another
Yeah.
theory that it's just human beings in the future who finally discovered time travel. They're traveling back and they're
Yeah.
evolving the more monkeyish older ancestors to evolve a little faster to help them out a little more, because in the future we have trouble, we have problems
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
You know, whether the other aliens showed up or there's super volcanoes, the Earth has problem.
Yeah.
GMOs are finally killing us. So there's that. And then there's also, I think Brother Dave just put in the room, he was talking about the Hanabu. So the theory, I think, is that the Foo Fighters, they never shot, right? They never did anything to interfere with the craft. And Bob
See,
Lazar.
stop you for a second. I forgot about Foo Fighters,
Yeah.
but like I said, they had the technology to create that, but they couldn't weaponize it. So when I put those together, I'm like, okay, that probably was Nazi stuff to kind of spook people, but they weren't able to weaponize it. But we know they had the technology to make something fly around like this, you know, and so maybe that's where it came from.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, so on that one, so what Bob Lazar said, which is why I love this topic, because there's so much information and you can take corroborating information of people who never interacted, and it
Right.
actually makes sense. So one of the things Bob Lazar said, he said that, well, the problem was the aliens that they worked with, or the crafts that they had, they gave them designs specifically So all the craft could do was fly, based on, and there's a good talk he had where he was discussing it, where he said the designs were very specific from an electromagnetic perspective, so that if we tried to put anything on there, if we made the door bigger, if we made the outside of the craft bigger, if we hung a big machine gun on the outside, or we put missiles, that it would disturb the sphere in a way where the craft wouldn't fly, and that they did it intentionally to help humanity to move forward with technology in a way that was peaceful.
Yeah, it's a good point, and there's a lot of like Star Trek episodes and where we're going to other civilizations and we don't want to meddle in their civilization. And what we hear is that is kind of a galactic law in a sense, that you're not supposed to meddle. And part of the reason is because people, like I said, they give us advanced technology, we just kill each other and ruin our planet with it. So what have we got from that? And most ETs are positive and they want us to develop positively. So they look at this planet where people are like killing each other and raping the planet, right. and they don't want to help us too much because we're not like mature enough in a way to make proper use of it. So that certainly makes sense, because that's one thing you hear is they have kind of constraints on making open contact and giving us too much technology. So that it's interesting that you say that, because that would jive with what I hear from other sources too.
Well, it would make sense. If I'm the little kid, I like the example of the ant farm, and I've got my ant farm going, and we're having trouble with the ants. I'm going to step in and make sure that the ants don't die, because I got my ant farm going, and a big red ant gets in my ant farm. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to kill it, right? I'm going to put the top on it so that no other ants or insects can get in there to hurt my ants. And so I laugh and I think about that from like even a biblical perspective, where nothing was supposed to interface with the planet so it could evolve on its own until the end times, when this massive Armageddon and these angels and demons would probably come down and destroy everything, because the devil was unleashed. And so most of the cultures talked about the end times. Yeah. And so to me, it actually makes good sense from an experiment, or we're just like some kindergarten or aliens science fair project. And that's going to run for a billion years.
Well, I'm going to give you a totally different source. There's a channeler named Barbara Marciniak. She's been channeling for 30 years, since 89. And she says she channels from the Pleiadians. Okay, sounds crazy. But she's got this stuff for 30 years that jives with all this. And Earth is considered like a genetic library. Because of the experience we've gone on and the diversity of intelligent life here, we're known all over this part of the galaxy. And it's, so when you think of experimenting, you think like a negative side, like we're in test tubes, but we're actually not being oppressed by them. We're being oppressed by the forces on the Earth. And that's totally weird, but I've listened to probably 40 hours of hers, and it goes back a long time, but it lines up with all the other leaks. But that the Earth is kind of it's a lab, but it's a noble laboratory in the sense of the diversity that's here in the human species doesn't exist among most species. And that diversity is seen as kind of valuable. Like, we know like only a small percentage of our DNA is used. The other percentage is not like random. It's also capabilities that we have that are turned off. And so we actually have incredible capabilities that aren't manifested because those parts of it's like a program, right? That part of the program isn't executed, but it's there to be turned on, and see where that goes.
And it's turned on by epigenetics. It's turned on by something that people say is multidimensional. They say it's aliens. They say it's what is it?
The sun.
God particle.
Now they're saying, leakers are saying the sun, energy from the sun can activate it. Yeah, and that's part of our transformation is the sun is going to increase this energy, and that will cause them to sort of activate in a way. I'll mention something else about peaceful use of this technology. The leakers say that ETs came to Eisenhower in the 50s. This was the beginning of the Cold War. And it's like, okay, are we going to nuke the planet? That was a serious concern of humans and also other species. And they came to Eisenhower and they said, we will give you advanced peaceful technology for energy and all this if you just roll back your nuclear program. And he said no, and that was it. And so we had this like turning point where they offered it, they couldn't force it on us, and is no. And then we end up with this 60-year of a militarized program that was all, dark program, funded off the books from, overruns and slush funds and everything. You can't imagine what we must have spent, because we bought this program, and it's probably trillions and trillions of dollars worth, and it's our technology. We don't even know that it exists. But anyway, that's another thing.
Yeah, and that actually, and that leads into the good, interesting discussions of the presidents who believed in aliens, right? All the presidents who saw UFO. You can actually spend a little time. There's actually a good video on YouTube that where it just went through the chronological order of the presidents who all believed in, the ones who saw them,
right?
You know, where all the UFOs flew over the White House.
That was in there's a whole story behind that. Maybe I won't go into it now, but that was in '53. That was Germans buzzing Washington to say, they wanted to work with us because their country got beat, but there were Germans who survived and they wanted to work with us because we had the infrastructure to build. But they were just kind of, these were from in South America, the ones that fled to South America. And we said, no, we didn't want to work with them. So they said, all right. And they buzzed Washington, D.C. And that's like, okay, we're able to do this. We can spook your country. We can go right over your Capitol building. And there's like newspaper photos of these, about, I don't know, 7 of them. And it was basically their way of saying, all right, you're going to play with us, or we're going to like buzz your country and you can't do anything about it. So, and we know publicly of, Wernher von Braun, and this was Arthur Rudolph, these German engineers who worked in the NASA program, but they were right there because, both the U.S. and Russia were like collecting up these German geniuses after the war, to develop our programs. And they were also in the secret program too. But I'll mention something else about this, about secrecy. What also happened in the Eisenhower administration, he talked about the military-industrial complex. And there was a group called MJ-12 that formed then. And then Kennedy starts to warn about it. And this secret government started forming then, and it formed in relation to these space projects and UFO projects and ET projects. And that's why the so-called security clearance of that is above the president. So you might say, well, why should the president believe in it? If this is going on, the president should know, because that part of the government and the military is actually secret from the president. And they'll tell the president if they want to, or they won't tell him if they don't want to. And that started with Eisenhower. And that's why Eisenhower sounded the alarm, because he realized he's a general. Yeah. He realized I'm president and I'm not running this program and it's in my military, and it never was under the control of the president since that time. And they even killed the first, I would say, allegedly, one of the first head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff named James Forrestal. Okay. He also wondered about this, like why these military programs are getting out of his control. And in 1949, he jumped out of the 12th floor window of an asylum. This is the chief of the military. Yeah. So that program is all related to deep state stuff and secrecy and the fact that the president whom we elect doesn't even know what's going on in these super expensive black programs that are sucking up our taxes and everything.
Right. Yeah. Well, and to me, and that's where it circles back around to the whole politics and being open-minded. So, again, government shouldn't have any secrecy. And it's lunacy for a country to elect a president who is supposed to make the decisions for the direction of that country. And that president doesn't even have the ability to see what these black projects are doing. I can't even project the amount of insanity that is. Like, you think about the presidents who was it, Clinton, who he had his own UFO files. He was looking into everything. And when he became president, he said, I'm going to let you know what I find. Hillary Clinton said the same thing, right? And they apparently, they said that he was shown the door. You don't have access to see this. And so Hillary offered that around the next election too. And I think that's huge. And I think they even asked the question in a presidential debate once. They asked the question, and I think Kucinich said he saw a UFO, and I think Obama said, well, what was his answer? He said, well, there could be aliens or something, but I don't know if they're aliens, but I know they're human beings that have trouble. And of course, everyone starts clapping. We need to worry about the humans. We need to worry about the humans. But to me, it's a very divisive and deceptive answer, because if there are higher technologies, if there are ancient technologies, if the government does have these things, they're being kept from those humans, which is why those humans are doing bad. And that's why I think it has to be a mainstream discussion, whether people believe in it or not. Like, that's the whole point, whether you believe it to an extreme or you don't believe it to an extreme.
Yeah.
knowing the truth, it allows that debate to come to an end.
I mean, so much of our politics and so much of our constraints and the arguments between right and left are based on scarcity, an idea of scarcity. You
Yes.
know, that we have to work for energy, that, you know, that staying alive and not dying requires, you know, $7,000 a year for health insurance, you know, and that kind of crap. And these technologies exist to keep people healthier and to give us energy. And when you have that, it's like a bonanza. I mean, once you have that, then it changes the equation. Like, well, maybe we can have free education because we don't have to pay for oil and gas, and you know, and we don't have to pay for healthcare at the level of expense we do. And that can change all the equations of, you know, because right now it seems like, you know, if Sanders is talking about free college, you know, that seems like such an outrageous thing. But in the scheme of things, that's probably less than healthcare costs or energy costs. So.
Right.
And like you say, you know, if we want to chart our future, I mean, our destiny altogether, we have to know what's real. We have to know the landscape, what's really going on, what technologies are available, you know,
Right.
and not elect these figureheads to run this political spectacle in front of us and, you know, argue about Russiagate all day long. I mean, until we fall over, you know. So
Russia's doing everything.
God,
Russia is just, oh my goodness, Russia and the Pokemon and Russia.
don't get me started.
You know, but and that actually it's still related because now all of the anti-Russia stuff. So they're saying now we're in an arms race, and now Russia.
Not if we don't want to be.
Yeah, not if we don't want to be. And it's funny, but they point at Russia, and we're driving all of it. Like we're the ones, we keep making bigger and better bombs, faster jets, spending more and more than everybody on the planet, and
Well,
we're creating this arms race where everybody else is arming up.
but you know what people say in these programs? Like Area 51, there's Chinese engineers there. There's Russian engineers there. So
Yeah.
the Cold War, you're like, holy shit, the Cold War was a spectacle. Now the generals believed it,
Yeah.
and they manipulated the public with fear, you know,
Yeah.
and they sucked huge amounts of money out of us to
Yeah.
build this program.
Yep.
But behind the scenes, we were working with Russia and we were working with China all through like the communist China era, you know. It's kind of shocking to hear that. But that these have been spectacles for the most part at the highest level, used to, you know, as just another way to frighten the population and draw resources out of them for their own defense, you know.
Right. I agree with that. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that because, and I think I'll go back and put my little theory out there, but I think the Russian satellite, I think nations don't exist. I think that at those levels, they're all on the same page. And I think when they got on the same page, so from a Russia, United States perspective, when Russia sent that probe to Mars and it was destroyed, do you remember that? What was the probe that Russia sent?
I don't know if that was
to Mars?
Russia or us. I know there's one probe, they made a miscalculation. It was like between metric and standard, and they basically thought they were going to land, and they basically did the math wrong, and instead of landing, they crashed into the surface. It was like a really like a freshman mistake. It's kind of funny, except that it's a waste of money.
Okay, it was called the Phobos 2. Phobos 2. I got it right there. I just pulled it up. So Russia sent this probe to Mars. And on its way to Mars, a funny story happened at band camp. It saw a shadow of a massive UFO on the surface of Mars, which is the picture I have up right there. And then it was flying to Phobos because Phobos has that sphere, that cube thing on Phobos that who Edgar Mitchell and everybody was talking about. And just prior to it getting there, the probe was destroyed.
Oops.
And oops, magically, you know, the probe just shut down. And just prior to it shutting down, it saw the picture I'm showing there. It showed a massive cigar-shaped something. Won't call it UFO. We'll call it a something.
Well,
Right there in front of the Phobos moon, and then the probe stopped. So I think what happened is Russia went up there and they're like, yeah, we're going to tell the truth. We're going to figure out things and find things out. We're going to, you know, and once they got up there, it's like, nope, that's not going to happen. And so I think they all came together on this same page where you keep all the monkeys, the 98% monkeys on the planet fighting with each other over nationalism, but they all work together with this 0.01% oligarchs and everybody else all on the same page discovering this. And the main reason I think that's the case is because when I was a kid, I remember in the early 80s, I saw satellite pictures that were crystal clear. I remember seeing my bike in my driveway because it was family day at the place my father worked.
Sure.
And this was in the early 80s. We had pictures that were crystal clear.
Yeah.
Better than the pictures you see on Google Earth today. And
well, they said you could read a newspaper headline from space. I just lost you there. I don't know if you're still.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit. Let me see if you keep up.
Okay. Yeah. Anytime I start talking about the satellite stuff, it gets a little weird. They don't like me talking about that.
Yeah, I hear you.
He's talking about stuff he knows. Let's not do that. But so you look at the pictures of the pictures that they get of Mars, of the moon. We send up these $500 million probes and $1 billion probes, and they send them up with cameras that have less technology than we had in the 1980s.
Oh, sure.
And people actually believe that. And so this is why I think they all collude, is because now Russia does the same thing. They send up these satellites, and the pictures come back. They're only, one pixel is like 300 square feet. So if there are structures on the moon, if there are trees, if there are rivers or whatever, Mars, moon, whatever, you'll never know. And so, and that to me is the damning thing. I think all the governments collude. I think they all work together on this technology because the governments are just shills for this 0.01% that runs our little planet, and they hide everything from us. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the whistleblowers say that there are manufacturing facilities on Mars. There are actually manufacturing communities on Mars. They're mostly underground because it's easier to build underground by tunneling than it is to build a structure on top of the ground because then you have to bring your materials with you. So, and then it's easier to hide from like telescopes and whatever. But they say there are structures there. There are structures on the backside of the moon.
Well, and there's I think there's a, and so it's funny to me. You had the.
The other thing I'll cut you off for a second.
Go.
The solar system is like 3 billion years old. They say there are ruins all over the solar system, that there have been advanced species here, like one that they call them the ancient builder race. That's the term they use, or Corey Good uses that, ancient builder race. Their ruins are so old, they don't know how old they are because they can't date them. They think it could be as old as 1 billion years. But there are structures. And here's the freaky thing. The doorways and the seats, the size of their habitation is so huge, it looks like they were 50 to 70 feet tall. Otherwise, why would they build it like 10 times the size of us? But they say there are ruins all over the solar system.
Well, it makes sense. There are megaliths all over the planet. If there's civilizations all over the planet. So pretty much everywhere you dig down on every continent, you find civilizations. I don't know if it was Michio Kaku or Neil deGrasse. I think it was Michio. Michio is a little more open-minded, not Neil deGrasse Tyson. But in terms of, he said, if we ever get out in space and we fly around, we're going to find destroyed planet after destroyed civilization, because that's the way it is on Earth. Every continent is full of them. And so life is everywhere. We suck. For some reason, we don't tend to make it. But that you would find, and that actually seeds into the Brookings report, right? So when we went to the moon, they said that the report said that if we find evidence of any civilizations that have made it to the moon, that you can't let these things, that you can't go back and tell the people on Earth because they'll lose their minds. They won't pay their taxes. They won't go to work. It'll destabilize the planet. And so I think about things in terms of the megalith civilizations on Earth that were just building all these massive structures that they know the Egyptians didn't build, the Mayans didn't build, the Incans didn't build. But I never really put it together the way you did. And I love how you just said that they're megalith builders that were all over the universe, that were building all of this stuff. And the governments who work well and play nice with the 0.01% that run our planet, they get to work with the technology. They get to explore it. But the ones who don't, they get their probes destroyed.
Well, I thought it was funny, and this is just a little, theory, but when Elon Musk went to launch that one rocket that blew up, there was a little UFO that zipped by right when it blew up. And it blew up. It was one of the little pods. You can see it, it's really fast, and you could see it in the video. Now it's grainy, it's fuzzy, you can't really tell. But at the exact moment that it blew up, and it didn't blow up at the bottom where the flame is, it blew up at the top where it's like storage. So how could there be a spark or something? Now, I'm not saying I know what happened, But I thought that was interesting because when you know that the aerospace industry is doing commerce in space, they're already doing it. My intuition is, well, if some guy on Earth says, I want to get into this in space and start a business, they'd be like, no, you're not.
No, you're not.
Sorry.
You don't know how
Let's
this
see if you
works.
can get off the launch pad first.
Yeah, I just pulled the picture up. I heard about that, and so the camera caught this little thing flying over, because I think at first the speculation was that it was a missile, right? But you had this little thing fly over, and it blew up. And so what's funny is so now
it was like a Foo Fighter. It was like a little Foo Fighter pod going by, and just when it was like closest was when the rocket went poof.
It's not the first time we heard this story, though, right? We heard this story. There was a whistleblower who came forward that talked about there was a UFO that blew up a rocket. Not, I don't know if it was one of the Apollo before around the time of the Apollo missions, and they had the footage, and so they had to they got rid of the footage. But we've heard this story before where a UFO is used to stop a rocket. And so it probably is that dance where, if you think that you're a billionaire, Elon Musk, you're going to save the Earth, you're going to tell the truth, you'll never get into space unless you play ball.
Yeah. Well, something else, and that brings up, and there are many accounts of this, that what do we want to call the 0.01%? Sometimes it goes by Illuminati, but people think that's like too mystifying. That glorifies them. Sometimes it's called the cabal. Corey Good has a term I love. He says, we don't want to mystify them. He calls them the secret Earth government and their criminal syndicates. That's what he calls them. Yeah. So what were we just talking about? That they've tried to start nuclear war more than once, and ETs have stopped them. And there's also, you probably heard about one account where ETs buzzed some missile silos, like in the northern plains, and basically shut down these missile silos.
Yep.
But there are specific accounts that the 0.01% has tried to start a nuclear, like, basically, you could say false flag. It wouldn't be false because it would really explode, but it would be an explosion that they could blame on a country. And now I'm getting into something else I won't go into too far into, but they say that the warning over Hawaii was a launch to try to provoke something to start a war with North Korea, and it was stopped. But actually it was stopped by us, not by ETs. But there are several accounts of UFOs buzzing like missile sites and making missiles go down, like go offline, and specific stories that there was intention to launch sometime and they stopped those intentions. So
right.
We got friends up there.
Yeah, well, there were various whistleblowers who said that, right? There were various whistleblowers who came forward. I want to say it was Britain and the United States where a UFO flew over and the missiles, they all shut down.
Yeah.
And 5 minutes later, and I think there was one where they were about to launch and it shut everything down. But they were basically, maybe this is America getting their warning and the UK getting their warning that, listen, this is not your experiment. This is our experiment. You'll play according to the rules. But, and once again, it's interesting that now we can talk about it just from a whistleblower perspective, because at any time, the government can come out and say, you're lying. They're not doing it.
I'm just talking fake news. You're just talking fake news.
It's just fake news. We'll censor it. We'll shut it down. We'll do anything. Never once has the American government come out to any of these whistleblowers. And I love the Disclosure Project because that's one of the best ones where you have 1,000 professionals who worked on these projects who are saying this is all real, have a congressional hearing. And of course, if you lie to Congress, it's a federal offense. You go to prison. So these are moms, dads, people who actually work, who want Congress to have official hearings so they can actually tell the world what they saw, and they're daring Congress to actually investigate. And Congress will not hear it. And no one has said that these people are lying, that they didn't work on these projects. So I find that, I also find it interesting that a lot of these people on their deathbeds, they're giving confessions that they worked on these projects. So they signed a non-disclosure agreement which said that they couldn't talk about it for so many years, and they realized, I've got cancer, I'm about to die now, so I'm just going to go ahead and tell the truth. And there were two of them that stand out in my mind where they're like, the aliens are here, we're working with them, we're working on this project, this, that, and the other. And it's scary, amazing, but it actually makes a lot of sense when you think about the religions on this planet and the things that the ancients have always said. It's
funny because they say the government has done studies to see who would be most sort of shocked or distraught if there's an ET announcement.
Mm-hmm.
And there's two groups. One is like Orthodox Christians, because it kind of upsets their religion. But you might, I would say you wouldn't believe it, but maybe you would. The other group is scientists. Believe it or not. You don't often find them together, but they're so rigid in their mindset often that they don't want to think of something that's really that much far beyond, that would change their worldview.
Right. Well, you know what? And so I can only talk about it from my perspective, but that's true if you believe that your book was written by God, right? It's true if you believe that human beings have never edited this book. It's true if you believe King James wasn't up to anything nefarious when he canonized your Bible 200 times. And so I think there's a large group of people from a Christian and Muslim. I'm
starting to lose you a little bit there.
All right. I see them from all different groups where they're not as staunch as they used to be. I think it's only a problem if you think you know it all. If you don't think King James knew it all, and you don't think, the people who came before you knew it all, then it actually makes a lot of sense.
Well, it's interesting because, and I'm very interested in religion too, and spirituality. There's a public religion that's used to manipulate people, and they can basically distort genuine religions. I'll just say I think Jesus was like a spiritually advanced human like many others. I don't know if he's the son of God, but but what Christianity has done is it turned it into kind of a form of crowd control.
Right.
But even the Book of Enoch, which you mentioned, the Book of Enoch is supposedly a history of what happened then, and it includes extraterrestrials, and it was kept out of the Bible, but it's an ancient text. Yeah. And I would agree with that, and I found, and this is a whole other subject, but, all the religions kind of seem different superficially, but pretty much every religion has a mystical depth to it, like what they call an esoteric depth.
Yep.
When you get to that depth, they're very similar. Meditation, love, good works, even reincarnation is covered in those.
Reincarnation, karma.
Yeah.
It's all there.
So
an omnipotent God, a creator God, a God that keeps driving. It all says the same exact thing. Brother West just said something in the room I find to be interesting. I wanted to put. He said human beings seem to be an infection on the earth, and that basically, if we ever got into space, we would destroy other planets probably the same way we destroy this one. And I think the brother's spot on. I think it makes perfectly good sense, even from a religious perspective, that we're given a chance to get it right. We're given a chance, and I'm always talking. I tend to talk more to the conservatives in the Christian community because we're the ones bombing the world and murdering everybody, supposedly. So you're given a chance. Your God gave you 10 commandments. Don't kill people. Don't murder them. Don't steal their land. Don't take their wives. Don't do this. And if you get it right, who knows what could happen. But if you get it wrong, Armageddon's coming. We're what he sees, unchaining the devil, and the demons will come down. And how I kind of view that, and most religions kind of say something along this path. If you don't actually do the things that prove you're not going to destroy other planets, you're not going to screw up our space, you're not going to break apart our space federation alliances, and you act like you have some common damn sense, you can follow these couple rules of the galaxy, leave people alone, let them have their free will, don't tell people what to do. If you can prove that you can do this on your planet and you can listen to this God extraterrestrial thing, then we'll let you in space. We'll let you outside of your solar system. But if you can't prove that you can't grow the hell up, you can't mature, you can't respect the other species that are out there, then an asteroid is going to find its way to your planet. Aliens and demons are going to come down. You'll have your Armageddon, and 12,000 years in the future, we'll try this again. But we'll use, instead of reptiles last time, we use monkeys this time. Next time, maybe we'll try insects or donkeys or something. Eventually, we're going to get a being that's smart enough that gets it, leave everybody alone, have peace, love, light, act like you have common sense, and we'll let you get out your solar system.
It's funny because that's always been an intuition of mine, even before I found all these leakers and everything was that we were kind of being quarantined because we're a danger to ourselves, that's bad enough. And that if we ever got our stuff together, which we should do and we shall do, that we would then be introduced to this galactic society and invited to participate in it. It just seems like a natural thing to me. And I like to think we're years away from that. I mean, a few years, not many years, but we'll see.
Hey, it makes perfectly good sense, brother. Perfectly good sense. So I know we pushed a little further beyond what we had planned to. It's always a great topic.
I know.
So there's anything else? I appreciate everybody jumping in. I think it was a good discussion. It was enlightening. I love how things all kind of come together and they all really make a lot of sense. Any closing words, Brother Carl, you want to leave anybody with, perhaps who's kind of new to kind of starting to take a look at this, or anything that you want to leave us with?
Well, I kind of echo what you're just saying. For many years when I was young, you were young, these different conspiracy areas attracted different types of people. So nerdy, geeky types were into the UFO and the ETs. And you had airy-fairy New Age types who were interested in like channeling and spirituality. And then you had other conspiracy types who were interested in like the banking and the Illuminati and the cabal, the government. And what's happening now is all of these different areas are coming together. Their leakers are saying the same thing. They're painting the same picture. And part of it is that the small group that tries to control the world has the technology, they have the contacts, they have the science, they have the medicine, and they even know spirituality. They know how spirituality works, but they practice dark spirituality. Go figure. And so it's important for us to kind of think more integratively too, and explore these other areas, the spiritual side and the technical side and the ET side, because all of these like whistleblowers and disclosures are all painting the same picture now, and I think it's coming to like the same future. So that's what I would end with.
I'm spot on. I agree with you, brother, and it makes sense just from a military strategic perspective. The censorship that's coming out, they're trying to shut people down. They're quieting them. They're fighting as hard as they can to get people to stop coming together and agreeing. The 99% monkeys who live on the ant
monkeys are waking up.
Earth, the monkeys are waking up. The monkeys are getting restless, and the monkeys are starting to agree. Now, mind you, I think the majority of the monkeys is still, they got their clubs and they're fighting each other in their tribes. But there are a lot of people who are really starting to say, you know what? I disagree with you, but I agree that we need to know the truth. So I'm not going to fight with you. Let's work together to try to figure out how to restrain these governments and find out actually what the heck is going on in our world.
And it doesn't take a lot of us. People say it takes about 5 to 10%, only 5 to 10% to make this shift. So we're going to do it.
We can do whatever we want. We can make anything we go viral if we want to. And so that's why I appreciate everybody joining in. I appreciate you guys sharing and your open-mindedness to look at some new topics. And I do encourage you, share with other people when they start to question these things. Go watch the eyewitness testimony. Don't fight with someone over vaccines. Don't fight with someone over synthetic drugs. Don't fight with people over UFOs or Russiagate. Just take the whistleblowers, take the truth and the testimonies that were put out there, and just always ask the question, how come the government doesn't address these whistleblowers? And it's a fight that you don't have to be in, because professionals are already making that fight for you. So I appreciate everybody taking the time. Brother Carl, appreciate you coming on. Definitely got to come on again. I think you and I have an awful lot in common. And everybody, you guys have a great day now.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.